Then it really hit me. I'm on the moon. I'm on the moon. And the excitement, the wonder, the thrill, the adventure.
When you think of the moon, you probably picture silent, empty dust and the famous footprints left behind by Apollo astronauts. But what if one of the men who actually walked there is now saying the story we've been told is missing something shocking?
Okay, not quite.
Hello, everyone. I'm Astronaut Duke. I was lunar module pilot on Apollo 16.
Charles Duke, the youngest man to ever step on the lunar surface, has finally broken a silence he kept for decades. He claims he saw something on the moon that wasn't in the mission plan. So what did he see, and why did he keep it secret for 50 years? Join us in this video as we reveal the details. Charles Duke finally reveals what he really saw on the moon. For more than 50 years, the story of the moon landings has been told in a very careful and controlled way. According to official records, 12 human beings traveled from Earth to the moon between 1969 and 1972. These men landed on a dry, gray surface that had no air, no water, no life, and no activity. They walked, collected rocks, performed experiments, and returned home. The story was presented as one of courage, intelligence, and scientific success. After returning to Earth, these astronauts were celebrated everywhere. They appeared on television, they spoke at schools, universities, museums, and public events. They wrote books and gave interviews. In all these appearances, they focused on the technical side of the missions. They talked about spacecraft systems, gravity, lunar soil, and the beauty of seeing Earth from space. The moon itself was always described as empty and lifeless. Interesting, yes, but simple. NASA made it clear that the moon was exactly what scientists expected it to be. The cameras showed everything. The microphones recorded everything. There was nothing hidden. There were no surprises. The moon was a dead rock, and the Apollo missions proved it. For most people, this explanation was enough, and there was no reason to question it. One of the astronauts who helped reinforce this story was Charles Duke. Charles Duke was part of Apollo 16 and became the 10th man to walk on the moon. At the time of the mission, he was 36 years old. He was an Air Force test pilot and a family man. He had followed a traditional and respected path into NASA. He was not known as emotional or dramatic. He was known for discipline, focus, and following instructions. Inside NASA, Duke had a strong reputation. He had already served as the voice of mission control during Apollo 11, speaking directly to Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin during the first moon landing. He was trusted. He was calm under pressure. He was the kind of astronaut NASA depended on to do things exactly the right way. Apollo 16 launched in April of 1972 and lasted 11 days in total. Duke and mission commander John Young spent about 71 hours on the lunar surface. They explored the Descartes Highlands, an area scientists believed might hold volcanic material. They drove the lunar rover, collected rock samples, placed scientific instruments, and followed a strict schedule. According to NASA, everything went according to plan. When the mission ended, Apollo 16 was labeled a success. Scientists praised the samples. Engineers praised the performance of the equipment. NASA reported no serious problems and no unexpected events. The mission was added to history as another clean and successful step in human space exploration. However, years later, some people who carefully watched the footage from Apollo 16 noticed small details that were never explained. There were moments when Charles Duke appeared to stop suddenly during his work. He would stand still and look off into the distance, outside the camera's view. During these moments, John Young could be heard asking if he was all right. Duke would respond, but sometimes there was a noticeable pause before he spoke. These pauses were never explained in mission transcripts or official reports. There was no mention of why Duke stopped or what he was looking at. At the time, nobody questioned it. The footage was accepted as normal, and the official story remained unchanged. For decades after the mission, Duke himself said nothing that challenged NASA's version of events. He continued to give interviews focused on science and faith. He spoke openly about how seeing Earth from space strengthened his belief in God. He talked about personal struggles and lessons from life. But he never spoke about anything unusual on the moon. To the public, Charles Duke appeared to fully support the official story. And for many years, that story went unchallenged. However, Charles Duke is no longer quiet. He revealed that there was more to the official story released by NASA. If Apollo 16 was truly a flawless mission, and the moon was exactly what NASA said it was, then why did Charles Duke spend decades avoiding certain details of his experience, and what was it about the lunar surface that he finally felt compelled to speak about years later? Stay tuned for more. What Charles Duke later said was left unspoken. As Charles Duke grew older, his public language slowly began to change. He did not suddenly reject NASA or deny the success of Apollo 16. Instead, he began to talk about experiences he said he had avoided discussing for decades. According to Duke, there were things that happened on the moon that did not fit into the simple story the public had been told. One of the first things Duke described was the way light behaved on the moon. Scientifically, sunlight on the moon should appear bright white because there is no atmosphere to scatter it. Duke agreed with this understanding, but he said that at certain moments, the light looked wrong. He described seeing colors such as blue and purple within the light itself. These colors did not behave like reflections. They shifted and changed when he moved his head or looked away and then looked back again. Duke insisted that these colors were not caused by his helmet visor or equipment. According to him, the light itself appeared altered, and this confused him at the time. Because the experience did not make sense scientifically, he did not report it. Duke also later spoke about hearing sounds on the moon. This directly contradicted everything astronauts were taught. Without air, sound cannot travel. Yet Duke said that both he and John Young heard tones while walking on the surface. These were not voices and not radio transmissions. They were not mechanical sounds from the suits. Duke described them as frequencies, sometimes smooth and sometimes uncomfortable. Because such sounds should not exist, Duke said they dismissed the experience and did not mention it to mission control. Reporting something impossible, he believed, would only cause confusion or concern. Another experience Duke described was a strong sense of being observed. He said this feeling was different from knowing NASA was watching through cameras and instruments. This felt deeper. It felt like awareness. According to Duke, the feeling was not threatening, but it was powerful. He said it would increase or fade depending on where they were standing, as if different areas of the moon felt different. Duke also described problems with time perception. Apollo missions were planned minute by minute, and astronauts relied heavily on timers. Despite this, Duke said his personal sense of time often did not match the clock. Tasks that took 20 minutes sometimes felt like only a few moments. Other tasks that should have taken 5 minutes felt much longer. He said John Young experienced the same thing, and their impressions matched each other, but not the mission schedule. The most serious claim Duke later made involved what he described as structures on the moon. According to Duke, while traveling several kilometers away from the lunar module, he noticed shapes on the horizon that looked too regular to be natural. These shapes appeared geometric and angular. As they moved closer, Duke said the formations looked like blocks arranged in a line and partially buried under lunar dust. Duke estimated that one of these structures was around 100 meters long. It extended into the surface at both ends, suggesting it was part of something larger. He said it did not resemble natural rock formations or random geology. According to Duke, he and John Young attempted to report what they were seeing to Mission Control. They described the shapes and their location. Duke said there was a noticeable delay in the response from Houston. Instead of asking questions or requesting photos, Mission Control instructed them to continue with their planned work. Duke said this response made it clear that NASA did not want the crew to investigate further. The observation was never included in official mission reports, and no public explanation was ever given. These later statements from Charles Duke stand in sharp contrast to the simple story told for decades. If Charles Duke had already helped guide humanity's first steps on the moon from behind a console on Earth, what happened when the man who once spoke through static finally stood in that silence himself? Let's learn more. The invisible voice who finally touched the moon. During the Apollo 11 mission, which was the first time humans landed on the moon, Duke worked as the capsule communicator, often shortened to Capcom. This role was always given to another astronaut. Capcom had one main job. He was the only person allowed to speak directly with the astronauts in space. Because of this, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were on the moon, the voice they heard from Earth belonged to Charles Duke. He passed along instructions, confirmed information, and helped guide the mission. Millions of people around the world listened to those conversations live. Even so, most of them did not know who Duke was or what he looked like. His voice was heard everywhere, but his face remained unknown. This situation created a strange experience for Duke. On one hand, he was deeply involved in the most historic space mission ever completed. On the other hand, he was not the one walking on the moon. According to later reflections linked to Duke, this left a lasting emotional effect. He helped others achieve a dream that he shared, yet he could only observe it from far away. As time passed, Duke continued his work with NASA and remained committed to the space program. However, guiding others to the moon while staying on Earth reportedly created quiet pressure inside him. He had trained just as hard as the astronauts who landed, and he carried the same hopes. This inner tension became part of how he later understood his own journey. When Duke was finally selected for Apollo 16, the mission meant more to him than just science or duty. According to later accounts, stepping onto the moon felt deeply personal. It was the moment when years of waiting and watching finally came to an end. For Duke, being on the lunar surface was not only a professional success, but also a moment of emotional balance. During the Apollo 16 mission, Duke said he made a personal choice that was not part of the official plan. He brought with him a photograph of his family. The photo showed his wife and their 2 sons. Duke later explained that he left this photograph on the moon. If accurate, this would make him the only person known to have placed a personal family image on another world. The photograph itself carried added meaning. Duke stated that there was a faint internal NASA code printed on the back of the photo. He also said he was allowed to leave it behind without going through the usual paperwork or formal approval process. This detail stood out because NASA missions were known for strict rules and careful records of every object carried into space. Duke also said that he did not leave the photograph just anywhere. He chose a specific spot. According to his account, he placed it near a rock that had a coded marking. This code, he claimed, did not appear in the public lists of lunar samples or landmarks released after the mission. The area was also linked, during the mission, to unusual magnetic readings recorded by instruments. While NASA has acknowledged that magnetic measurements were taken during Apollo 16, there is no public record clearly linking those readings to the photograph or the marked rock. As a result, Duke's later statements describe personal actions that do not appear in official summaries. Taken together, these details present Apollo 16 not only as a scientific mission, but also as a deeply human experience shaped by patience, quiet emotion, and personal meaning. If Duke's silence was built on years of fear, training, and loyalty to NASA, what finally broke that silence? And what was the strange sight on the moon that he could no longer keep to himself? Let's find out. The sight he couldn't explain and couldn't forget. According to statements Duke made many years after the mission, the experience began with an observation that did not fit anything he had been trained to expect. He described seeing a dark shape on the lunar surface that did not behave like dust, light, or shadow created by equipment. In his account, the object moved in a controlled way and appeared solid enough to cast a shadow on the ground. Because it did not match known lunar conditions, Duke later said it stayed in his memory as something unusual and difficult to explain. The moment reportedly happened while Duke was using the lunar rover. At that point in the mission, the crew had driven a considerable distance away from the lunar module. While the rover was stopped and the dust from its movement had settled, Duke said the dark shape crossed his view. It was low to the ground and moved quickly, but not randomly. The movement appeared purposeful rather than accidental.
They can appear, and so nothing human can make a 90-degree turn at 3,000 miles an hour. And that's my fear. People laugh at me generally, but I'm not going to be.
The sighting lasted only a short time, but it was clear enough to stand out. At the time, Duke did not report what he saw. He later explained that this decision was shaped by his training as an astronaut. Astronauts were taught to focus on tasks, follow procedures, and avoid distractions that could not be measured or confirmed. There was no official rule or process for reporting unexpected moving objects, especially during a mission with limited time and strict goals. Duke believed that speaking up could disrupt the mission or raise questions he could not answer. As a result, he chose to stay silent and continue working. For many years, Duke kept the experience to himself. He assumed it might have been a mistake caused by lightning, stress, or exhaustion. However, decades later, he said he reviewed archived rover footage from Apollo 16. In one section of the film, he claimed to notice a dark shape moving across the lunar surface in a way that closely matched what he remembered seeing. The object appeared to have form and a shadow, which made the moment feel more real to him. Duke did not describe the footage as proof, but as confirmation that his memory was not entirely imagined. Even after seeing the footage, Duke remained hesitant to talk about it. He understood that astronauts are expected to speak clearly and carefully about science, engineering, and mission results. Unexplained events are often dismissed or misunderstood, and Duke feared that discussing such a topic could harm his reputation or distract from the mission's scientific success. For these reasons, he avoided the subject in public and private discussions for many years. As Duke grew older, his view began to change. He reportedly reached a point where honesty mattered more to him than professional caution. Near the later years of his life, he decided to share the experience publicly. He did not present it as evidence of alien life or as a dramatic discovery. Instead, he described it as a personal truth that he had carried alone for decades. He stated that before the end of his life, he wanted the story to be known, even if it remained unexplained. The account leaves many questions unanswered. Duke himself did not claim to know what the object was or why it was there. His statements raise broader questions about whether other astronauts may have seen similar things and whether unexplained observations were quietly set aside during the Apollo era. No official explanation has been offered, and no confirmed conclusions have been reached. As it stands, the incident remains unresolved. Duke's role in the story is not presented as that of a scientist offering proof, but as a witness sharing an experience he could not fully understand. So, what happens when we start asking bigger questions like whether we can even survive on Earth long enough to need another home? Let's delve deeper. The moon landing that would be hard to fake. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a well-known scientist. He talks about space, planets, and science in a way that people can understand. In one talk, he talked about a lot of big ideas. He spoke about the moon landing, climate change, and the idea of moving to other planets. He also talked about God, probability, and artificial intelligence. The way he spoke was calm, but the ideas were powerful. One of the first things he talked about was the moon landing. Many people believe the moon landing was real, but some people say it was faked. Tyson said that faking the moon landing would actually be harder than going to the moon.
If you wanted to fake the moon landing, you would have to fake all of these documents. And it just seems to me it's way easier to just go to the moon.
He explained that the moon mission was not just a video or a picture. It involved a huge rocket called the Saturn V. It involved engineers, designs, blueprints, and real hardware. Tyson said that if someone wanted to fake the moon landing, they would need to fake everything. They would have to fake the rocket designs, the engineering records, and the actual hardware. They would also have to fake the footage, the photos, and the data. This would be a massive job. In his view, it would be easier to actually go to the moon than to fake the whole thing. He also said that the proof of the moon landing is not only in pictures, it is in the physical evidence. The rocket designs and the hardware are real. The documents are real. The people who worked on the project are real. So, according to Tyson, the idea of faking it is not logical. Next, Tyson talked about climate change. He said that climate change will not make Earth completely unlivable, but he said it will make life much harder. He gave a simple example using New York City. He said that if all the ice on Earth melted, sea levels would rise. The water would reach the height of the Statue of Liberty's left elbow. This would flood New York City. Many coastal cities would be underwater. Tyson said that this would create a much harsher world. People would still be alive, but life would be very difficult. He was not saying that Earth would be destroyed. He was saying that the environment would change drastically. People would have to adapt to a new reality. After talking about climate change, Tyson moved on to the idea of moving to other planets. He said that people sometimes talk about escaping Earth by moving to another planet, but he said this is not a real plan. He said there are very few places in the solar system where humans could live. He explained that Venus is too hot. He said it would vaporize anyone who tried to live there. Mars is a different story. Mars has a day that is similar to Earth's day. It has seasons and polar ice caps. There is also evidence that water once flowed on Mars. These facts make Mars a possible place for humans. But Tyson said that Mars is still very hard to live on. He introduced the idea of terraforming. Terraforming means changing a planet to make it more like Earth. He said that Mars could maybe be terraformed because of its day length and seasons. But he also said that this would require massive engineering efforts. Then Tyson said something important. He said that if humans ever develop the technology to terraform Mars, then we would also have the technology to repair Earth. In his view, it would be smarter to focus on fixing Earth instead of abandoning it. If we can change a planet like Mars, we can surely change Earth back to a safer and healthier state. In this way, Tyson linked the future of space travel with the future of Earth. He suggested that human progress should not be about escaping problems. It should be about solving them. If the moon landings are real and the science is solid, then why does Neil deGrasse Tyson warn that our future might depend less on space travel and more on how well we take care of Earth before it becomes unlivable? Let's find out. God, probability, and the future of AI. In the second part of his talk, Tyson shifted from space and climate to deeper ideas. He talked about God, suffering, probability, and artificial intelligence. His words were simple, but the ideas were heavy. Tyson began by talking about suffering and natural disasters. He mentioned the 1755 Lisbon earthquake. He said it took the lives of about 80,000 people. He explained that the earthquake happened on All Saints' Day. Many people were in churches. The churches were the largest buildings. When the earthquake hit, those buildings collapsed first. Tyson used this event to ask a difficult question. He asked how an all-powerful, all-good God could allow such suffering. He said that either God is not all-good or God is not all-powerful. This was not a new question, but Tyson presented it in a clear way. He made it easy for people to understand the problem. Then, he talked about different ideas of God. He said that some people do not believe in a personal God. Instead, they believe in a God that is more like the laws of physics. They believe God is the force that created the universe. They do not believe God tells people how to live their daily lives. Tyson said he does not focus on religious beliefs unless they help lead to new scientific discoveries. He was not trying to attack religion. He was trying to show that science and faith can be different ways of understanding the world. Next, Tyson talked about probability and how people misunderstand it. He gave a simple example using coin flips. He asked people to imagine 1,000 people flipping a coin. Half of them would be eliminated each time they flipped tails. After 10 rounds, only one person would remain. That person would have flipped heads 10 times in a row. Tyson said the media would probably interview that person. They would say the person was lucky or chosen by fate. People might say it was a miracle. But Tyson said this is not a miracle. It is just probability.
It's a quick experiment. Line up 1,000 people and give them a coin and have them flip the coin. And if whoever gets tails, tell them to sit down. So it's about half. So 500 people left. You repeat it, 250 people left.
He explained that many people do not understand how rare events happen. They think rare events mean something special. They think the universe is sending them a message. But Tyson said that rare events can be explained mathematically. He said, God is not luck. Tyson then turned to artificial intelligence. He said he is not personally very worried about AI taking over the world. He acknowledged that many experts are worried. He compared this to science fiction stories that warn people about the future. He said scary stories about AI can be useful because they make people cautious. They make people think about the future. They make people prepare for possible dangers. Tyson also explained that current AI is task-based. He said AI is designed to do specific jobs. For example, AI can build cars in a factory. But he said this does not mean AI is becoming a general intelligence. It does not mean AI can do everything better than humans. However, Tyson also admitted that if AI experts are correct, there might be a future where AI becomes powerful. He said AI could judge humans harshly. He said AI might see humans as harmful because of the way humans destroy the environment and cause extinction. He warned that in such a scenario, AI could decide to eliminate humanity. He did not say this would definitely happen, but he said it is possible if AI becomes too powerful and humans do not change their behavior. In the end, Tyson's message was clear. He said humans need to act better. He said humans need to learn to live responsibly. He said the future depends on how humans behave today. If the moon was harsher and more alien than we imagined, and Apollo 16's real achievements were buried under fame and myths, then what did Charles Duke feel he had to defend so urgently before his story faded forever? Let's take a closer look. Charles Duke's last mission, the truth he wants the world to remember. Charles Duke, one of the last living astronauts who walked on the moon, has started speaking more openly about what he saw and felt. At old age, he feels a strong need to make sure people understand the real story of Apollo 16. He believes many people have forgotten or misunderstood what the mission was really about. Duke says the moon was not a calm, pretty place like many pictures show. Instead, It was harsh, bright, and scary. The light was intense, the shadows were deep, and the landscape felt strange and alien. He thinks the real moon experience has been softened in movies and stories, and he wants people to know the truth. He also feels frustrated that Apollo 16's science work is not remembered the way it should be. Most people only talk about Apollo 11 and the first step on the moon. But Duke believes Apollo 16 was one of the most important missions for science. He says the mission was not just a quick visit. He and John Young spent 71 hours on the surface, moving across rough ground, collecting samples, and using tools to study the moon. They brought back 209 pounds of rocks and soil, some of the most valuable and varied samples ever found. They also used special instruments like X-ray and gamma-ray devices to study the moon's chemistry. This data helped scientists understand how the moon formed. Even today, researchers still study the samples and data from Apollo 16. In recent years, Duke has also faced people who say the moon landings were fake. He spoke to them directly and simply said, "Sir, I was there." He believes no online claim can match the truth of someone who actually lived it. Duke feels a duty to protect the Apollo story before it is lost. He knows that fewer astronauts are still alive, and he worries that the mission will become just a story in books. That is why he speaks at events and talks to young people. He also believes Apollo was not the end of space exploration. He sees the moon as a stepping stone to Mars and supports new missions like Artemis. For Duke, Apollo was only the beginning. Do you think the moon landing was fake? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for joining us as we uncovered the real story behind Charles Duke, his unique role in Apollo history, and the truths about the moon landing that most people never heard. If this deep dive helped you understand the mission better, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen for more stories. See you there.